Please, somebody help me. They took my brother." The scream sliced through the carnival air so sharply that the entire fairground seemed to stop breathing. Music from the carousel faltered in the distance. A balloon slipped from a child's hand. Even the scent of grilled meat hung frozen in the warm noon breeze. And running through that sudden stillness was a little girl in a yellow sundress, eyes wide with fear, her sandals slapping hard against the pavement as though she could outrun what had just happened. Caleb Falcon Reaves turned at the sound. One moment earlier, he had been flipping burgers at the Iron Rider's food booth, the sunlight glinting on polished chrome behind him. The riders had promised themselves a quiet life for 4 years now. No fights, no confrontations, just charity events, community rides, and booths like this one. But that scream hit him with the kind of weight that collapses old boundaries in a single heartbeat. The girl stumbled, nearly falling, and Eli Spanner Cruz caught her gently before she hit the ground. She clung to the front of his vest with trembling fingers, trying to breathe through the panic choking her words. Falcon dropped the spatula without realizing he'd done it. He knelt slowly so he wouldn't frighten her further. "It's all right," he said softly. "You're safe here. What happened?" The girl's chest rose and fell too quickly, her breaths breaking like waves during a storm. "They took Isaac. They grabbed him and pushed him into a truck. I couldn't stop them." Falcon steadied her shoulders. "What's your name?" "Mila," she whispered. "Mila Lawson." The surname struck something deep inside him. Derek Lawson had once ridden with the Iron Riders before walking away to raise a family far from their old world. Falcon remembered the day he left, the quiet handshake, the promise to build something better, something safer. Falcon kept his voice soft. "Mila, look at me. Your brother. What did the truck look like?" Her hand shook as she pointed toward the east exit. Black. Big, and there was a sticker on the back, a snake with bright eyes. Every rider standing nearby tensed. They didn't need Mila to say the name. The emblem belonged to the Cobra Serpents, a gang that thrived on intimidation. Their worlds had not collided in years, but old conflicts had a way of resurfacing when least expected. Grizzly's voice came through low, steady. "Falcon, I just saw a black Tahoe pulling out toward County Road 12. Had the serpent decal." Falcon took one slow breath, the kind a man takes when he knows the next step will cost him something he once tried to protect. "Where's Derek?" he asked. Mason Grizzly Cole already had his phone pressed to his ear. "Elena says he's at the Riverside job site. She's crying. Says they snatched Isaac right in front of Mila." Falcon's jaw tightened. He reached into his pocket, dialed emergency services, and reported the abduction in a calm voice that did not match the storm brewing beneath it. The dispatcher told him to stay at the fair until officers arrived. Falcon ended the call quietly. "I'm sorry," he murmured, "but we can't wait." He lifted Mila's chin gently. "We're going to bring your brother home. Promise?" Her voice was so small that the wind almost carried it away. Falcon didn't promise recklessly. But he also didn't walk away from a child's fear. "We're not stopping," he said softly, "until he's safe." Grizzly handed Mila off to a vendor who had already stepped forward, concern etched in his face. "We'll watch her," the man said, placing a comforting arm around her shoulders. Falcon turned to his crew. "Alpha Team, with me. Bravo, take the parkway. Charlie, get high ground and watch sightlines. No aggression. Priority is the child." The riders moved without hesitation, Helmets clicked into place. Engines growled awake, not with the roar of rebellion, but with the quiet determination of men who understood exactly how fragile this moment was. 15 bikes lined up behind Falcon in a smooth, practiced arc. To anyone watching, it would seem as though they had rehearsed this exact formation. But it wasn't rehearsed. It was instinct. Falcon sat astride his bike and looked back once more toward the carnival. Mila stood between two adults now, her hands clasped together at her chest, as if she were holding on to hope itself. Falcon raised a hand toward her, a silent reassurance. Then he lowered his visor, and the world narrowed to a single purpose. The Iron Riders rolled out of the fairgrounds like a river of steel and leather, threading through parked cars and vendor tents with controlled speed. Behind them, the half-cooked burgers smoked unattended, a thin curl of gray rising upward like a quiet signal of everything they were leaving behind. The town blurred past. The hardware store they'd helped repair after a storm. The diner where locals always saved the back booth for them. The quiet sidewalks where people once crossed the street to avoid them, before realizing the riders had changed. But none of that mattered now. Not their reputation, not their promises, not their quiet life. A child was somewhere ahead of them, scared and alone in the back of a dark vehicle, and the world had just asked the riders whether they were still the men they used to be, or the men they had worked so hard to become. Falcon opened the throttle slightly, the bike purring beneath him like a creature fully awake. He spoke through the radio, voice steady. Eyes sharp, distance safe. We're not here to scare the driver. We're here to bring Isaac home. Grizzly answered from behind. Falcon, we've got the Tahoe in sight. And with that single confirmation, the Iron Riders disappeared into the open road, chasing the thin thread of hope Mila had placed in their hands. The highway opened in front of them like a long strip of steel-colored ribbon, shimmering under the late morning sun. Falcon leaned forward on his bike, the wind catching his vest as the Iron Riders moved in tight formation behind him. 15 engines rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Not wild, not frantic, just determined. That was the way Falcon liked to ride when the stakes were high. No wasted movement, no unnecessary noise, just intention shaped into motion. Grizzly's voice drifted through the shared radio channel, calm despite the situation. Falcon, I've got eyes on the Tahoe, a quarter-mile ahead. It's weaving hard through traffic. Copy, Falcon answered. His tone stayed even. Panic helped no one, especially not a child. Bravo team. Take Riverside Parkway. If he keeps his line, you'll intercept at the Miller Junction. Shift acknowledged with a soft click of his mic. Tank chimed in next, steady as always. Charlie team is at the overpass. Multiple angles covered. Falcon watched the Tahoe dart between lanes like a trapped animal searching for a hole in the fence. His mind tracked distances, angles, and risks automatically. Every parked truck, every blind turn, every gap between cars. There were no complicated symbols or tactical markings in his thoughts, just instinct refined through years of riding. The goal was simple enough for anyone to understand. Keep the boy in sight without pushing the driver into a panic that could hurt him. His phone vibrated against his chest. Derek Lawson was calling. Falcon gestured for Grizzly to take point, then answered while leaning carefully into the wind. Derek, I'm here. Derek's breath came harsh, uneven. Mila called me. Falcon, they took Isaac. My son, my boy. We're on them, Falcon said gently. We're staying at a safe distance until police arrive. There was a short pause filled with the roar of traffic on Derek's end. Then came the truth, Derek had been holding under his tongue for too long. Falcon, they did it because of me. Falcon didn't respond immediately. He let the man find his breath. 3 months earlier, without telling anyone in the club, Derek had testified in a federal courtroom against Victor Cobra Ramirez, the serpent leader. He thought the testimony was sealed, thought his family would never be touched. But someone had leaked the list of witnesses. It didn't take Falcon long to piece the rest together. Cobra wasn't sending a message. Cobra was collecting a debt. They found out, Falcon said quietly, steering around a delivery truck. And they came for Isaac. Derek cursed under his breath, his voice shaking with fury and guilt. Falcon, I'm heading your way. I'm 25 minutes out. Stay with your family, Falcon answered softly. We'll bring your son back. No, Derek said, firmer now, stronger. I'm coming. Falcon didn't argue. A father's heart does not respond to logic when his child is in danger. So he simply said, then follow my lead. We do this smart, or we lose him. The Tahoe suddenly swerved across 2 lanes and dove toward the exit ramp for the industrial district. Tires screeched, horns blared, and a woman in a sedan braked so hard her coffee spilled across her dashboard. Falcon motioned for the riders to maintain their distance. Shift's voice came through, controlled and focused. Bravo, Team Parallel. If they keep straight, we'll be waiting at Merchant Street. The Tahoe accelerated again, its back end fishtailing as the driver tried to outrun not just the riders, but the consequences of his own orders. Falcon could almost feel the panic building inside the vehicle. The Serpents weren't used to being pursued by anyone who could keep up with them. The Tahoe hooked an abrupt right, diving into a narrow labyrinth of graffiti-covered warehouses. Tank's voice came steady as stone. Falcon, you've got one of their escorts falling back. Young rider. Probably a new recruit. Falcon didn't like the idea of a frightened rookie trying to play hero. Young serpent prospects tended to make mistakes. Mistakes could get a child hurt. Hold position, Falcon murmured. Let him burn off his fear. The alley narrowed. Trash cans rolled, metal scraping. Falcon's front tire missed a wall by inches. The roar of engines bounced between brick walls, creating the illusion of many more bikes than the 15 actually threading through the maze. Shift's voice broke in again. He's heading for the old construction zone. Lakeside redevelopment. They're funneling traffic through a single-lane detour. Falcon pictured the place instantly. A half-finished project with tall concrete barriers, parked excavators, and only one narrow path winding through the debris. A trap for anyone who didn't know the layout, and a perfect place to end the chase safely. Bravo, team, Falcon said. Block the straight route, force them into the detour. Already moving, Shift replied. Moments later, Falcon watched it happen. The Tahoe barreling forward, suddenly finding its path blocked by 3 motorcycles parked crosswise at the main junction. With no time to think, the driver slammed the wheel and chose the only open road, the detour curve. Tank's voice rumbled through the channel. Charlie team has the far end blocked. They're running into a funnel. Falcon pushed through dust clouds as the Tahoe bounced along the uneven ground. A skid, a sharp turn, a concrete barrier too close. The Tahoe clipped the edge with a metal scream and spun sideways before coming to a full stop. The world held a breath. Falcon signaled his men to keep distance. No sudden moves. No one wanted bullets flying near a child. The driver's side door opened. A serpent lieutenant stepped out, his vest marked with a coiled cobra. He kept his gun pointed downward, but the threat, unspoken, hung in the air. "We just want the boy," Falcon said. His voice was soft, steady, almost quiet enough to be mistaken for someone making a simple request. "Let him go. Walk away." From the passenger side, a second figure stepped out, a man Falcon recognized. Raphael Ghost Medina, calm, controlled, dangerous in a different way. Ghost's eyes flicked from Falcon to Grizzly to the bikes behind them. "You want war?" he asked softly. "Because that's where this is headed." "No," Falcon replied. "We want Isaac." The rear door cracked open, and a small figure stumbled out. Isaac Lawson, wrists bound, cheeks streaked with tears and dust. Derek arrived just in time to catch him, pulling his son into an embrace that made the world feel whole again. Falcon felt every part of himself relax. For 3 seconds, everything was right. Then engines growled behind them. The second Serpent SUV arrived, flanked by 3 more riders. Torian Blades Hughes stepped out, shotgun cradled in his arms. Falcon heard the quiet shift in the air, the sound fear makes before it becomes action. Blades pointed at Isaac. "He comes with us. Orders from Cobra, not negotiable." Derek shielded his son. Grizzly stepped forward, fury rising, but Falcon lifted his hand in a single silent command. "Not yet. Not like this." Blades moved fast. Too fast. His men seized Isaac, ripping him from his father's arms. Derek fell to the dirt, gasping as boots struck his ribs. Isaac screamed for help that couldn't reach him in time. Falcon's hand hovered near his belt but didn't move. Ghost already had his weapon raised toward him. If Falcon resisted now, the boy would die. "Stand down," Falcon ordered quietly. "Everyone, stand down." The words tasted bitter, like gravel under the tongue, but losing Isaac would be worse than losing pride. Blades shoved the child into the SUV. The convoy reversed hard and vanished into the shadows of the Downs, the Serpents' home territory. Falcon looked toward the distant sound of police sirens. Too late. He helped Derek to his feet, steadying the man as he shook with grief and rage. "We'll get him back," Falcon whispered, but Derek's voice broke. "How?" "They're taking him to a place we can't follow." Falcon placed a hand on Derek's shoulder, his voice a low promise. "Then we'll find another way." The warehouse by the river had once been a place where the Iron Riders gathered after long rides to share stories and tune their engines. Today, it felt like a hollow ribcage of steel and shadows, holding the weight of everything that had just happened. Falcon guided Derek Lawson inside, one arm steadying the man who still held a palm pressed to his ribs where Blades had kicked him down. The others formed a wide circle, not out of formality, but out of an instinctive need to give grief its own space. The river outside moved slowly, carrying flecks of sunlight across its surface. Falcon had always believed water could calm the mind, but even the soft lapping against the shore couldn't quiet the storm in Derek's eyes. The father who had held his rescued child only moments before now sat staring at his empty hands as if they still carried Isaac's warmth. Tank Ward approached quietly. "Falcon," he said softly, "you need to see this." He held out Derek's phone, which had begun to vibrate. Falcon lifted it with care, almost afraid of what he'd find. The screen displayed an unknown number and a single attachment. When he tapped it open, the warehouse fell silent. The image showed Isaac tied to a wooden chair in what looked like a basement. Bare cement walls, a dim bulb shining overhead. His cheeks were streaked from dried tears, and his head slumped slightly, as though exhaustion had already settled heavy on his small body. Under the picture was a message typed in short, cold words. Recant in 90 minutes, or the boy dies. See, Derek made a sound between a gasp and a cry, reaching instinctively for the phone, but Falcon held it steady so he wouldn't drop it. Don't, Falcon whispered. Look at me first. Derek lifted his gaze, eyes filled with shattered resolve. They'll kill him. Falcon knelt down so that their faces were level. They want you scared. They want you to lose control. If you do, you play right into their hands. Isaac needs you focused, not broken. Derek swallowed hard. How do we fight someone who sends this? Falcon looked toward the doorway where sunlight formed a faint blade of brightness on the floor. We don't fight on their terms. We make them come to us. Behind him, the riders began assembling their own kind of order. Maps unfolded across a battered wooden table. Radios were checked, frequencies calibrated. Tank tapped through traffic camera footage, assembling what he could from the chase. Every turn, every alley, every frame Isaac was visible. Shift. Delgado traced their likely escape route with the tip of a gloved finger. They're going deeper into the downs, he murmured. They've probably switched vehicles already. We'll lose them if we charge in blind. We're not charging in, Falcon replied. Not into their territory, not into a place they control. He turned toward Eli Spanner Cruz, who looked up with steady eyes despite the fresh bruise on his cheek. You left your vest behind, right? Eli nodded. Didn't want to stain it with funnel grease at the carnival. A faint attempt at humor softened the tension, but only for a breath. Good, Falcon said. You're going in. Derek shook his head sharply. No, they'll kill him if they see someone snooping around. And what if they spot you? You don't know that neighborhood. Eli gave him a soft smile. I grew up 2 blocks from there. Know every cracked sidewalk. I'll be fine. Then his smile faded to something more earnest. Let me do this. Isaac needs us. Falcon placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. In and out. No more than 20 minutes. You see anything off, you abort and call us. Eli nodded once, mounted a nondescript bike, and rolled quietly out of the warehouse yard. Falcon turned to Tank. Okay, what else do we have? Tank tapped open a city grid. 3 possible serpent strongholds. Clubhouse, 2 public. The warehouse on Pike, empty since the raid last winter. That leaves the old fish processing plant on Wharf Street, isolated, 1 road in and out, perfect for a hostage. Falcon studied the map with a slow, steady breath. They expect us to storm the downs to get there. Every lookout will be watching for us. Shift leaned forward, tracing a finger across the river. But the plant sits right near the old river bridge. If we use the bridge, we never have to step foot in their territory. Falcon's eyes sharpened. A single-lane bridge. 1 way in, 1 way out. Tank's lips curled. A natural choke point. Falcon tapped the bridge lightly with his fingertip. We make a deal with them. We set the exchange on this bridge, not in the downs. Derek brings a signed recantation, one that looks official but means nothing. They bring Isaac. And if they refuse? Grizzly asked. They won't, Falcon answered quietly. Cobra needs Derek's recantation more than anything. Without it, he faces a lifetime behind bars. He'll do anything to get it. Derek closed his eyes briefly, as though bracing himself. I'll sign whatever we need, fake or real. Just get me my son. Falcon shook his head gently. You won't sign anything real. You've already done enough. This time, the weight isn't yours to carry. Minutes passed slowly. The dusty beam of sunlight crawled across the concrete floor as if marking every moment Isaac remained in danger. Falcon checked his watch. 10 minutes. Eli should be calling. The radio crackled. Eli's voice, breathless but controlled, came through. Falcon, I'm good. Listen. I found him. Basement room like the photo. 2 guards. Isaac's tired, but he's okay. They didn't see me. Derek let out a sound that was half relief, half anguish. Falcon closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting gratitude soften the edges of fear. You're out? Falcon asked. Almost. The radio hissed again. A muffled scuffle, a shout. Eli's voice strained now. Got made by a lookout, but I'm clear. Meet you soon. The line went silent. Falcon exhaled slowly. He made it out, and we know where they're holding Isaac. That's enough. They had 40 minutes left. Time to make the call, Falcon said. Derek's hands trembled as he dialed Cobra's number. The phone rang once, twice, then clicked. Lawson, I assume you've reconsidered. Derek swallowed once. I'll sign your paper, he said, each word spoken with the weight of a man bargaining with his own heart. But we do it my way. And what way is that? Cobra's voice slithered through the line, smooth and cold. Old River Bridge, Derek said. In 80 minutes, public ground. You bring Isaac. I bring the recantation. No one hides. Everything stays in view. There was a long, calculating silence. Then Cobra spoke. Fine, but if I see a single badge or a single rider, your boy goes in the river. The line went dead. Falcon turned to his men. He agreed. Everyone mount up. Positions as planned. As the riders prepared to leave, Falcon placed his hand lightly on Derek's shoulder. We're getting your son back, he whispered. But we're doing it on our terms, not his. The warehouse doors slid open with a long, aching groan. Outside, the river shone with the sharpness of early afternoon light, as though the world were holding its breath for the next chapter of the day. Falcon mounted his bike, his expression calm, his resolve like steel wrapped in leather. Behind him, 14 engines rumbled awake. The road toward the bridge stretched forward, quiet and unwavering, as though guiding them toward a place where truth would have to be faced, and where a father's hope might finally meet a child's fear halfway. The road to the old river bridge stretched beneath the riders like a long breath held too long, released only in small pieces as the engines rolled over patches of cracked asphalt and faded white lines. The afternoon light had begun to soften, turning the shadows longer and the air cooler. Falcon rode in front, posture steady, mind turning through possibilities the way a mechanic turns a wrench, each click measured, careful, deliberate. The plan was fragile, built on timing and trust, and everything depended on keeping Isaac safe during the exchange. But danger had a way of leaking through even the tightest plans, and Falcon felt it like a hum beneath his ribs. They parked at the west end of the bridge, a half-mile ahead of schedule. The structure rose over the river like an old spine, metal beams rusted by years of storms, its single lane forming a narrow path suspended above slow-moving water. To Falcon, it felt strangely fitting, the kind of place where truth had nowhere to hide. Shift and Tank began setting up their angles. Tank at the southern bluff with his camera rig. Shift at the service walkway beneath the bridge. Grizzly coordinated the parallel routes, marking traffic positions so no vehicles could slip past unnoticed. Falcon checked his watch. 70 minutes left until the exchange. Derek stood near the guardrail, breathing through the ache in his ribs. He had changed into a clean shirt, not because it mattered to Cobra, but because he wanted Isaac to see his father standing tall, not broken. The forged recantation lay in a simple folder tucked under his arm. Falcon had made sure it looked just official enough to bait Cobra's hunger for leverage. The river moved below them with slow determination. Everything felt still, too still, as though the world itself were waiting for something to arrive. Falcon was reviewing the positions one last time when his phone vibrated in his vest. The contact name was one he hadn't seen in years, Knox Rivera. Falcon hesitated for a moment, then answered. Knox. Reaves, Knox said. His voice was rough, but steady. Where are you right now? Falcon didn't answer immediately. Some names carried history, and some histories didn't sleep easy. The Iron Riders and the Silver Saints had once stood on opposite sides of lines drawn in anger and smoke. Those lines had faded, but not vanished entirely. Working, Falcon replied carefully. We saw the chase, Knox said, cutting straight to the point. Saw the video a guy posted from the fairgrounds. That's a kid, Caleb, a little one. Falcon closed his eyes for a breath. Yes, Isaac Lawson. They're using him to pressure Derek. You heading to a meet? Falcon looked at the bridge stretching forward. Something like that. Silence held the line for a moment, heavy enough to feel. Then Knox spoke again, voice quiet but certain. You're not doing that alone. Before Falcon could respond, another voice came through, someone in the background of Knox's call. Tell him the lions are coming too, the voice said. A kid is a kid. Knox continued. Steel lions, night howlers, iron stallions, all saw the video. Nobody's wearing colors, no attitude, just presence. You understand? Falcon's breath left him slowly. Knox, I didn't call for backup. You didn't have to, Knox replied gently. Sometimes the world calls us. Falcon didn't argue. He simply gave the coordinates. 15 minutes later, the sound of engines rolled through the valley like a distant storm, low and steady. One by one, bikes emerged from the tree line. 20, then 30, then more. The first to arrive were the Silver Saints, their rides shining under the softened light. Behind them came the Steel Lions' deep-voiced Harleys, followed by the leaner silhouettes of the Night Howlers and the Iron Stallions. All told, 52 riders eased into formation at the mouth of the bridge. No colors, no patches, no banners. Just people who had decided that a child's life mattered more than old grudges. Falcon stepped forward as Knox dismounted. They shook hands without ceremony, without tension. Just two men who had carried too many ghosts and finally found a moment to set them down. Thank you, Falcon said quietly. Knox shrugged. We've all got kids in our circle somewhere. Doesn't matter whose club they belong to. Derek stood behind Falcon, stunned at the gathering. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Knox told him. You just need your boy back. The riders moved into silent positions, filling the long approach like watchful statues. A few checked their camera gear, raising lenses that glinted like small beacons under the fading sun. They weren't preparing for battle. They were preparing to witness, to make sure nothing would be hidden in shadows again. Tank adjusted his camera harness, ensuring the live stream backup was active in case anything went wrong. If they move wrong, the whole world will see it, he murmured. Falcon nodded. That's the point. Shift passed around backup radios and helped coordinate the new arrivals without raising his voice. He guided each group to a spot where they could stand without blocking the road or provoking the serpents. Everything needed to feel steady, calm, undeniable, visible. Derek stared down at the folder in his hands. Falcon. What if they know it's fake? Falcon turned toward him, voice soft. Then they'll have to pretend not to know. Because right now, the only thing they want more than revenge is that piece of paper. Derek pressed his lips together, nodding slowly. I just want him back. And you will, Falcon said gently. Today, you will. He checked the time again. 50 minutes left. The sun slipped lower, casting the first hints of gold across the water. A breeze moved through the valley, carrying the scent of pine and river mud. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called, a long, echoing sound that drifted over the water before dissolving into quiet. Falcon felt the moment settling into place like a final puzzle piece. No matter what happened next, the world would be watching. As he looked across the gathered riders, men and women who had set aside grudges, who had answered a call no one spoke out loud, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not confidence, not pride. Hope. Hope that sometimes, even in a world as rough as theirs, people could choose to stand together for something that mattered. And as the wind tugged gently at his vest, Falcon whispered a silent promise to the boy waiting in the dark basement across the river. We're coming, Isaac. Hold on. The evening settled over the river in a soft gradient of amber and blue, the kind of fading light that made the old bridge look older still, as if it had carried too many stories on its rusted spine. Falcon stood near the midpoint, glancing at the flow of the water below while he listened to the controlled breathing of the riders behind him. 52 engines had gone silent. 52 men and women waited without shifting their weight, forming a quiet wall at the west end of the bridge where the pavement met gravel, like a line drawn not in threat, but in promise. The air held a gentle tension, a kind that didn't shake or rattle but simply settled on the shoulders, reminding everyone that the next few minutes meant everything. Derek Lawson stood at Falcon's side, clutching the folder with the false recantation inside. Even from a short distance, Falcon could see the faint tremor in the father's right hand, but Derek's spine stayed straight, and his gaze didn't drift from the opposite end of the bridge. Grizzly approached quietly. Falcon, he murmured. We've got movement. Headlights at the far curve. Falcon nodded without looking back. Positions, he said softly. The word was mostly breath, but it moved through the riders like a wave, each person settling into the space where they were meant to stand. Shift crouched beneath the bridge walkway. Tank knelt behind a low beam with his camera pointed toward the center span, and 2 members of the Steel Lions stood near the eastern guardrail, phones raised but still. Grizzly added, Local officers are 1 minute out, holding at the forest road. They'll wait until you signal. Good, Falcon said. Let's keep it peaceful. He stepped forward and lifted his hand once, letting Derek come stand beside him. The wind moved gently across the water, brushing a ripple of cool air against both of them. Derek exhaled slowly. I'm ready, he whispered, though his voice carried the tremor of a man who knew readiness didn't matter in moments like these. Falcon put a hand on his shoulder. You're not alone. The headlights appeared fully then, first one pair, then a second behind it. The black Tahoe rolled onto the bridge, accompanied by 2 Serpent motorcycles. Their engines were quieter than usual, as if the riders instinctively understood that this was not the place for noise. Falcon watched the vehicles approach with a stillness he had learned long ago. Never blink in a moment where someone might mistake fear for hesitation. The Tahoe slowed 10 yards from Falcon and came to a full stop. Its engine hummed in the air like a nervous whisper. The passenger door opened with a faint metallic click, and then he stepped out. Victor Cobra Ramirez. He wore no colors, no vest, no markings, just a dark jacket and the unsettling calm of a man who believed he still controlled the world beneath his feet. Cobra walked toward them with the easy stride of someone who had orchestrated countless confrontations and never considered losing one. But when he reached the midpoint and looked up, his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. He saw the wall of riders, the silent witnesses, the raised phones, the wide, unbroken view of every bystander lined along the guardrails. He saw the fact that there was no corner to vanish into, no shadow to hide a crime. Cobra covered the shift with a smirk. "Quite a crowd you brought," he said. Falcon didn't respond. He simply held Cobra's gaze, letting calm become its own quiet force. Blades slid out of the Tahoe next, holding Isaac by the upper arm. The boy's face was pale under the bridge lights, eyes swollen from tears, but still open, still aware. Falcon felt a tightness in his chest that he didn't allow to show. Derek stepped forward. Falcon kept pace with him, but didn't put a hand out to stop him. A father needed to stand beside his child, even if he had to cross a chasm of fear to do it. "Where's the document?" Cobra asked. Derek lifted the folder slightly. "Right here." Falcon spoke before Cobra could take a step. "Isaac comes first." Cobra chuckled softly. "You're not negotiating, Reaves. I am." The wind shifted again, lifting the corner of the false recantation in Derek's hand. Phones zoomed in, cameras focused, lenses glinted like small, waiting witnesses. "No," Falcon said quietly. "You're not." Cobra turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing. He was calculating angles now, distances to the riders, how quickly police might arrive, whether or not someone in the crowd might be armed. Falcon could almost feel the mental chess unfolding. "Cobra," Falcon continued gently, "you walk away from this with the recantation, and maybe you buy yourself one more month of freedom. But the moment you hurt that child, or even threaten him, this bridge becomes the place that ends you." Cobra's jaw tightened. "You think cameras scare me?" "They don't scare you," Falcon answered softly. "They expose you." Tank's camera light blinked once, catching Cobra's attention. Then a few of the Silver Saints raised their phones higher. A group of locals behind the club walkway whispered as they streamed live. The sound of approaching sirens hummed faintly from the western road, distant but unmistakably drawing closer. Cobra looked at Derek. "Give me the paper." Derek held it out, but not far. "My son first." Blades shoved Isaac forward hard enough that the boy stumbled. Derek lunged to steady him, pressing the boy tight against his chest. Isaac cried into his father's shirt, the sound muffled but full of exhausted relief. Falcon stepped closer, closing part of the gap between himself and Cobra. His voice remained tender but firm. "It's done. You've made your bargain. Walk away." Cobra snatched the folder from Derek's hand and flipped it open. Falcon saw the exact moment Cobra realized the recantation was worthless. Blank seals, incomplete formatting, no legal weight at all. Cobra exhaled through his nose, a quiet sound that carried more rage than a shout ever could. "You think this will protect him?" Cobra hissed. "No," Falcon replied with calm certainty. "This will." He nodded toward the crowd. The phones, the riders, the rising sirens, the entire world gathering its breath for the truth. Cobra's eyes flicked to the cameras again. Falcon could see him weighing the options. A violent move here would be recorded from more angles than a courtroom could handle. Even if he got away from the bridge, he wouldn't get away from what would happen next. Every action would multiply its consequences until even he couldn't outrun them. Finally, with a sharp movement of his hand, Cobra signaled to his men, "We're done here." Blades and the other serpents turned back toward the Tahoe. The engine growled as they reversed down the bridge, disappearing into the dusky light where pavement met forest. Falcon didn't exhale until the sound of their engine faded completely. Behind him, 52 riders raised their engines in a single unified roar, not triumph, not aggression, but something closer to a vow, a sound that said, "A child is safe, and that is enough." Falcon placed a hand lightly on Derek's back as the man held Isaac close. "You did well," Falcon whispered. But even as the child sobbed against his father, Falcon knew the night wasn't truly over. Exchanges like this didn't end conflicts. They merely shifted them into new shapes. Still, for this moment, for this small, fragile space between danger and dawn, the bridge felt like a place where truth had finally stood still long enough to be seen. The night descended slowly after the exchange, settling over the river like a soft blanket that did little to warm the things left unresolved. The old bridge, emptied now of its tension, carried only the faint echo of footsteps and the soft rumble of departing engines. Falcon watched as Derek held Isaac close, whispering words into the boy's hair. Words meant to reassure, though both of them shook in ways neither wanted the other to notice. When the last of the riders eased off the bridge and disappeared into the tree-lined road, the quiet felt heavier than the roar that had filled the air moments before. The first police vehicles arrived gently, without the usual fanfare of flashing lights or blaring sirens. It was as though the officers, too, sensed they were stepping into something fragile. Detective Naomi Hart stepped out of the lead car, her expression calm but alert. She was not a woman easily startled, nor one easily swayed by surface appearances. She approached Falcon and Derek with slow, deliberate steps. "I heard reports," she said softly, looking at Isaac with a mixture of relief and concern. "I'm glad he's safe." Derek clutched his son a little tighter. "They gave him back," he murmured. "That's what matters." Naomi nodded but did not immediately answer. She surveyed the bridge, the faint glow of smartphones still recording the last remnants of the scene, and the silhouettes of riders parking discreetly on the sidelines. Her eyes were thoughtful, the way someone looks when they see not just what happened, but what will come next. "Falcon," she said gently, "I need to talk to you." Falcon stepped away a few paces, letting Derek comfort Isaac in the quiet space near the guardrail. Naomi motioned for Falcon to stand beside her, away from listening ears, though the bridge was so open that voices drifted no matter where they stood. "I've reviewed some of the footage already," she began, "and I'm going to tell you something plainly. You saved that boy." Falcon exhaled quietly. "That was the goal." Naomi's gaze softened. "And you achieved it without a single strike thrown. No retaliation, no escalation. You did everything the system asks of civilians in a dangerous situation, even though most people couldn't have." Falcon sensed the shift, the part she hadn't said yet. "But?" Naomi studied him for a moment, her voice lowering. "But saving him this way complicates the case against Cobra. The defense can now argue that Derek's testimony was coerced, She glanced toward the folder Derek still held, even though it contained nothing real. Or worse, that the recantation was forced. Falcon shook his head slowly. Derek was never coerced. He testified because it was right. I know, Naomi replied, but courtrooms don't work on what we know. They work on what can be proven or twisted. Falcon looked down at his hands, calloused, steady, the hands of a man who had lived 2 different lives already. You're saying Cobra might walk? Naomi didn't flinch. I'm saying his lawyers will use tonight to argue he feared for his life. Public confrontation, multiple riders, cameras everywhere. She paused, letting the reality settle. The judge could see this as instability in the witness. The defense could claim Derek was pressured into testifying. And depending on the judge, yes, Cobra could be released on bond. Falcon felt the quiet hit him harder than a shout could have. The world didn't always reward the right decisions. Sometimes it punished them in ways that made no sense. Isaac is safe, Falcon murmured, almost to himself. That has to mean something. It does, Naomi said gently. But the law is slow, and men like Cobra are fast. Behind them, Derek had brought Isaac over to sit in the passenger seat of the cruiser. The boy clung to his father's sleeve, unwilling to let go. Every few seconds he glanced over his shoulder, as if afraid someone might take him again. Naomi followed Falcon's gaze. I want you to hear something from me directly. You aren't in trouble with the police tonight. The department saw the video of the chase. They saw how carefully you handled everything. They know you saved lives, not endangered them. Falcon nodded silently. However, she continued, this won't stay contained. The federal prosecutors will want statements. The defense attorneys will dig for anything that helps them. And Cobra's people will push their own version of the story. Every decision made on this bridge will be held under a microscope. Grizzly approached then, his boots quiet on the metal grating. Falcon, he said softly, you need to see this. Falcon stepped toward him, and Grizzly held out his phone. A news alert glowed on the screen. Local gang leader released on bond after emergency hearing. Falcon's stomach dropped. Already? Grizzly nodded grimly. Video from the exchange spread fast. Cobra's lawyers claimed the meeting tonight put him under public threat. Judge ordered temporary release to review the footage in full. Naomi rubbed her temples. That's what I feared. Everything you did to keep Isaac safe might be used to undermine the case. Derek overheard the last part. His shoulders slumped, as if all the strength that had carried him through the day finally gave way. So he gets to walk free, he whispered. After all of this, he's free? Naomi moved closer, speaking gently. It's temporary, but yes, for now he's out. Derek's breathing quickened. Falcon saw the panic rising, not the wild kind, but the quiet, suffocating sort that crept into a man's mind when he realized he had no protection left. What am I supposed to do? Derek asked, voice cracking. He knows where we live. He's already hurt my family. What stops him from coming again? Falcon answered softly. We'll protect you. Derek shook his head bitterly. You can't stand outside my house forever, and the police can't either. Naomi hesitated, then admitted, he's right. Until there's new evidence, our options are limited. We can put extra patrols near your neighborhood, but Cobra has a long reach. Derek swallowed, looking down at Isaac. Then I need to take them away. I can't stay here, Falcon. I can't risk it. Falcon didn't try to talk him out of it. Some decisions were born from instinct deeper than logic. Where will you go? Somewhere far, Derek whispered. Anywhere but here. Naomi nodded quietly. I'll help you coordinate something temporary. But Derek, leaving won't erase the danger. It's only buying time. Time. Falcon felt the weight of that word settle in his chest. Time could heal or harm. It could expose truth or bury it. And right now, they didn't have enough of it. Falcon placed a hand on Derek's shoulder. We'll find a way through this, he said gently. Tonight was a step, not the final one. The father nodded, though his eyes held a lingering storm. He helped Isaac into the back seat, and the boy leaned against him as if trying to merge into the safety of his father's side. As the cruiser drove away, Falcon remained standing on the bridge, watching the taillights fade into the night. The water moved slowly beneath him, reflecting the last thin line of twilight. It looked peaceful, but Falcon knew the ripples beneath the surface could hide powerful currents. He stayed there until the final echoes of the evening disappeared, letting the weight of doubt settle quietly on his shoulders. Saving Isaac had been the right thing, perhaps the only thing they could have done. But right didn't always mean easy, and sometimes doing right opened doors you wished had stayed shut. Falcon turned back toward his men with a steady breath, carrying the certainty that the hardest part of the journey had not yet begun. 3 days passed, but they did not pass gently. They moved the way heavy clouds drift across the horizon, slow, oppressive, and casting shadows that made daylight feel dull around the edges. Derek Lawson had barely slept since the night on the bridge. Even when exhaustion forced him into brief pockets of rest, his mind jolted awake with the same image repeating itself. Isaac tied to a chair in that dim basement, his small body shaking under a single bulb. No parent forgets a moment like that, not even in dreams. The Lawson home had changed in ways subtle and painful. Curtains stayed drawn even during the day. A suitcase lay half-packed in the living room, clothes folded with the shaky intention of leaving at a moment's notice. Isaac clung to his father so tightly that Derek had begun stepping carefully, afraid to jostle the boy's arms wrapped around his waist. Maria, his wife Elena in this retelling, moved around the house quietly, as if raising her voice might break something fragile in the air. Each time her phone buzzed, she flinched. Once, she whispered to Derek, "What if they come again?" And though he tried to reassure her, his face betrayed that he had been asking himself the same question every hour. On the third afternoon, just as sunlight began to soften into the warm gold that precedes evening, a motorcycle eased to a stop outside the Lawson house. Not a loud arrival, not a heavy one, just a low, steady purr that felt almost polite. Derek looked out the window and recognized Falcon stepping off his bike, helmet tucked beneath one arm. Falcon approached the door with the kind of calm that didn't demand attention, but carried it anyway. Derek opened the door before Falcon could knock, the two men exchanging a quiet nod that said more than words would have. Falcon stepped inside and took in the room, the half-packed suitcase, the bundled blankets on the couch where Isaac had been sleeping beside his father, the dimmed lights, and the silence holding everything together like thin thread. "How's he doing?" Falcon asked gently, though he already sensed the answer. Derek glanced at Isaac, who sat curled on the sofa, holding a small plush bear in both hands. "He doesn't want to be in a room alone," Derek whispered. "Not even for a minute." Falcon nodded. He walked toward Isaac slowly, keeping his voice soft. "Hey, champ." Isaac looked up with wide eyes but didn't speak. Falcon didn't push. Instead, he sat on the edge of the coffee table, careful not to crowd him. "I brought something I need your dad to see," Falcon said quietly, lifting a small flash drive between his fingers. Its metallic surface reflected the warm light in the room. "But you can stay right there with him." Derek motioned Falcon toward the kitchen, leaving Isaac perched on the couch, but within arm's reach. Falcon plugged the drive into Derek's laptop. The screen lit the dim kitchen with a bluish glow. "Someone made this?" Derek asked, noticing the file name. "Bridge Truth. Edit 1. Tank pulled clips from our cameras," Falcon replied, "and some others pulled videos from phones around the bridge. Someone, don't know who, put it all together. It's been circulating. You should see it." Falcon clicked play. The video began with soft music. Nothing dramatic, just a calm background tone. Then came the scenes. The riders leaving the fairgrounds, Falcon guiding Mila to safety, Alpha Team forming their chase pattern. From there, quick cuts showed the careful distance kept behind the Tahoe, Grizzly signaling directions, Tank monitoring blind corners. Not a single moment showed the riders threatening anyone. Not a single frame showed aggression. They were protectors, not pursuers. Then came the bridge. Camera angles switched between phones held by bystanders, helmet cams, and even the viewpoint of someone standing near a lamppost behind the guardrail. The footage captured every expression: Falcon's steady resolve, Derek's trembling hope, Isaac's fear, and Cobra's snarling frustration. When Cobra realized the recantation was fake, the camera lingered on his face long enough to reveal a flicker of panic he had tried so hard to hide. Finally, the video ended with that single roar of engines, a sound that now resembled something like a vow more than anything violent. Text faded gently onto the screen. Some heroes ride differently. When the video ended, Derek blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. "How many people have seen this?" Falcon exhaled softly. 19 million. In 2 days. Derek's breath wavered. 19? He didn't finish the sentence. "It's all over the country now," Falcon said. "People are calling it proof of community courage. Families are sharing it. Teachers, even some officers." Derek looked down at his hands. "I still don't feel safe." Falcon nodded. "I know." He clicked open another file Tank had sent him. Raw helmet cam footage. It showed the riders' precise maneuvering through traffic, slowing near crosswalks, avoiding danger even when fear pushed them forward. It showed Falcon stopping Grizzly from escalating at the crash site, and the riders' deliberate stillness during the exchange. It didn't show anger. It didn't show pride. It showed discipline. Derek whispered, "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to know the whole story before I show you the rest," Falcon answered gently. "Something happened online last night." He opened a third file. This one was a collection of screenshots, messages, and logs. At the top of the folder was a symbol, a tiny lantern, no signature, no username. Derek frowned. "What is this?" "A leak," Falcon said, keeping his voice calm. "The lantern, whoever they are, got into the Serpents' encrypted server. Financial records, orders, all of it." Derek stiffened. "Orders?" Falcon clicked on an image. It was a time-stamped message. "Take the Lawson boy. Video proof if possible." Derek's hand flew to his mouth, his eyes filled with tears he had been fighting off for days. Falcon reached out, steadying his shoulder. "There's more," Falcon said softly. "The FBI moved fast. They raided 21 locations this morning. Ghost, Blades, all taken in. And Cobra? Derek asked, voice barely audible. Back in custody, Falcon replied, without bond this time. Derek sagged against the counter, every ounce of tension releasing at once. He's really gone? For now, Falcon said. He's caged, and with this evidence, it won't be temporary. Derek closed his eyes, breathing deeply, perhaps for the first time in days. When he opened them again, something had shifted inside him. Not full peace, not yet, but something like the beginning of it. In the living room, Isaac peeked in, his small voice carrying softly. Dad? Derek held out his arms, and Isaac rushed into them. Falcon watched the father bury his face in his son's hair, as though trying to assure himself that this moment was real. Why'd they stop, Falcon? Isaac asked, his words muffled. Falcon knelt beside him. Because the truth came out, he said quietly. And sometimes truth shines brighter than fear. Isaac looked at him with wide eyes. Like a lantern? Falcon smiled gently. Exactly like a lantern. The boy nodded slowly, holding on to his father as though the world might shift beneath his feet if he loosened his grip. Derek stroked Isaac's back, letting the rhythm of that simple motion anchor them both. Falcon rose with a careful breath. You can rest now, he said. You're safe tonight. Really safe. Derek looked up, eyes grateful and tired. Falcon, you didn't just save my son. You saved us. Falcon shook his head with quiet humility. The truth saved you. We just made sure the world saw it. Outside, the sunset deepened into a quiet purple, the kind of sky that feels like a soft curtain closing after a long day. Falcon stepped out onto the porch, letting the cool breeze brush against him. The world had changed in 72 hours, shifting from fear to exposure, and from exposure to justice. And though the battle was not completely over, the hardest part had finally begun to ease. He closed his eyes, letting the soft sound of evening settle over him. Somewhere behind him, Isaac laughed. A small, tired laugh, but a real one. Falcon allowed himself a brief smile. Sometimes justice did not ride in with noise or thunder. Sometimes it arrived on quiet wheels, carried by people who refused to look away. The sun dipped behind the tree line as if finally allowing itself to rest, leaving behind a soft, dim glow that spread gently across the neighborhood. For the first time in days, the Lawson home breathed a little easier. The tension that had once clung to every corner like dust was thinning, replaced by something quieter, something almost unfamiliar after the storm. Relief. Inside the living room, Derek eased Isaac down onto the couch where a blanket had been waiting for him. The boy blinked slowly, his lashes heavy with exhaustion instead of fear. It had taken 3 days for Isaac's body to let itself relax. 3 days for his shoulders to stop quivering at every distant sound. Tonight, for the first time since the kidnapping, his breaths came evenly, soft inhales and slow exhales, as though his mind had finally granted him permission to rest. Falcon stood a few steps back, watching the gentle rise and fall of Isaac's chest. Some part of him had not realized how tightly he'd been holding his own breath until he saw the boy drifting towards sleep. Relief washed through him like warm water, loosening knots he had carried quietly since the moment Mila ran screaming through the carnival. He had carried the memory of Isaac's wide, terrified eyes with him every minute since then. Now, watching the boy settle into the comfort of a familiar couch, Falcon felt something inside him unclench. Elena Lawson stepped out from the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea. She handed one to Falcon and one to her husband, her hands trembling just slightly, not from fear now, but from the emotional exhaustion of the past 3 days. He asked if the bridge was really that big, she murmured, trying to smile. I told him it was only as big as it needed to be to bring him home. Falcon took a slow sip. The tea was warm, calming, the flavor soft and herbal. He's strong, he said quietly. Stronger than most adults I've known. Derek moved to sit beside Isaac, brushing a loose curl from the boy's forehead. The father's eyes held both relief and a grief he wasn't ready to process yet. A grief that comes after danger. When a parent finally has space to feel everything they were too terrified to acknowledge. He asked me earlier, Derek said softly, if bad people can disappear forever. He shook his head slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. How do you explain to a child that the world doesn't always stay fair? Falcon lowered himself into the chair across from them, elbows resting gently on his knees. You don't lie, he said softly. But you don't take away hope either. You tell him the truth, that there are bad people, yes, but there are good people too. And sometimes the good ones are louder. Derek let those words settle into the quiet room. A small smile tugged at his lips. He said you sounded like someone from a bedtime story. Falcon chuckled under his breath. Let's hope I'm not the kind that keeps him awake. The moment drew a small laugh from Elena as well, a sound fragile but real. She sat down beside Derek, leaning her head against his shoulder. For a moment, the 3 of them, father, mother, child, felt like a completed circle again, unbroken, held together by nothing more than quiet presence. A soft vibration buzzed on Falcon's phone. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and then hesitated. Derek noticed. Something new? Falcon nodded slowly. Detective Naomi Hart did a segment on national news tonight. It's worth hearing. He turned the volume down low before playing the clip so Isaac wouldn't stir. Naomi's calm voice filled the room through the phone speaker. The men involved in rescuing Isaac Lawson did not act out of vengeance. They didn't corner, provoke, or threaten. They used no force. In every moment captured by hundreds of cameras, they protected a child without escalating danger. I'd rather live in a city where people like that step forward than one where everyone turns away. Falcon paused the video. Derek let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. She said that openly? She did, Falcon replied. And people listened. It's shifting the conversation. It won't erase everything, but it helps. Elena wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Then maybe this won't follow Isaac forever, she whispered. Maybe it can become something else. Falcon nodded. It already is, he said softly. You'd be surprised how far truth can travel when people hold it up to the light. Isaac shifted on the couch, stirring slightly. Falcon stood and walked to the doorway, giving the family space to breathe, to sit together in the kind of silence that doesn't weigh anything down. Through the crack in the front curtains, he noticed neighbors leaving small candles near the walkway outside, a quiet gesture of solidarity, almost ritualistic in its tenderness. People had been stopping by all evening, leaving flowers, cards, and drawings from children in the neighborhood. A simple message lay beneath most of them. We're glad he's home. Falcon stepped outside onto the porch for a moment, letting the night air touch his face. The breeze carried the scent of the river and the last traces of daylight fading into dusk. Across the street, two people stood on their porch, giving Falcon a small wave when they noticed him. Not the wave of strangers, but the wave of people who had been watching from behind blinds, hoping, fearing, praying without using the word. He returned the gesture, though the humility in his eyes made it clear he wasn't sure he deserved the gratitude. The porch light from the Lawson house spilled onto the walkway, casting a warm glow across the ground. Falcon thought about the lantern symbol on the leaked files, the quiet emblem of truth cutting through darkness. It made sense now, in a way he couldn't express out loud. Isaac had been trapped in a room with no windows, but the world outside had become bright enough to break that darkness open. When he stepped back inside, Isaac was finally asleep, deeply, peacefully, his chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of a child who no longer feared the shadows around him. Derek looked up. "He's gone," he whispered, the relief softening his entire posture. "Good," Falcon murmured. "Let him rest. Let all of you rest tonight." Elena reached across the couch to touch Derek's hand. Falcon felt a quiet warmth settle in the room, the kind of warmth that comes not from fireplaces or blankets, but from something deeper. The return of safety after it had been taken away. Falcon stayed only a few minutes longer, offering gentle reassurances about police patrols and updated protective measures. He didn't linger. He knew this evening belonged to the family who had carried the storm and survived it. As he stepped back out into the night and slipped on his helmet, Falcon looked once more at the glow spilling from the doorway behind him. A soft, golden light that felt like a promise. Some nights, justice came through courtrooms and laws, but tonight, justice came softly, carried by truth, courage, and a community that refused to let a child's voice be lost in the dark. The next evening settled over the town with a kind of calm that felt earned, as though the sky itself had decided to pause and breathe after so many days of tension. Falcon rode slowly toward the Iron Rider's clubhouse, the hum of his engine softened by the warm twilight air. The roads were quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that invited reflection rather than unease. Falcon felt the weight of the last several days sitting across his shoulders. Heavy, yes, but no longer crushing. Something had shifted. Something had opened. As he approached the long gravel driveway leading to the clubhouse, he noticed lights glowing softly through the open barn doors. They weren't harsh overhead bulbs, but strings of warm amber bulbs hung along the rafters, casting the room in a gentle glow that made the space feel more like a gathering hall than a garage. The familiar scent of motor oil mingled with something warmer, food, laughter, the hum of low conversations. Falcon eased his bike into the lot, surprised to see more motorcycles than he had expected. Not just Iron Riders bikes, but machines from other clubs, each with its own style. A wide-handled cruiser he recognized as belonging to the Steel Lions. A sleek black and silver ride from the Night Howlers. A deep red machine marked with the signature chrome of the Iron Stallions. And parked near the entrance, unmistakable in its weathered blue paint, was Knox Rivera's Silver Saints bike. Falcon removed his helmet and walked inside, the gravel crunching softly under his boots. As soon as he crossed the threshold, a hush rolled through the room, not out of tension, but out of respect. Every conversation paused, every head turned slightly, and then, almost at once, smiles formed. Quiet ones, genuine ones. Grizzly stepped forward first, a plate of barbecue in one hand and a grin that stretched beneath his beard. "Thought you'd never make it," he said. Falcon shook his head lightly. I didn't know there was something to make." "Oh, there's something," Knox Rivera said from across the room, leaning against a workbench. His arms were folded, but his expression had softened since the hard-edged intensity he'd worn on the bridge. "We figured you'd need a night with people who get it." Tank chimed in from behind a row of bikes. "And maybe a night where you don't have to carry the whole world on your back." Falcon offered a faint smile. "I carry what needs carrying, that's all." Knox pushed himself away from the workbench. Sometimes it's easier when more than one set of hands is holding things up. Falcon took a slow breath and looked around the room. The other clubs weren't spread out in territorial clusters the way biker clubs usually were. Tonight, everyone was mixed together. Steel lions laughing beside iron stallions, howlers sharing a bench with riders. There were no patches worn openly, no bright colors declaring affiliations. Just people, just riders. As he watched them, Falcon realized how unusual it all was. Old rivalries had paused. Old grudges had been set aside, not in loud declarations, but in the quiet act of standing together. Knox walked up beside him. "You know," he began in a tone that carried both sincerity and a hint of amusement, "I've been riding a long time, Falcon. Seen a lot of standoffs, a lot of trouble, a lot of men pretending to be legends." He paused, letting the air settle. "But what happened on that bridge, that was different. That wasn't about clubs. That wasn't about pride. It was about a kid." Falcon nodded. "It was never about anything else." Knox raised an eyebrow. "That's exactly why people followed your lead." Falcon shook his head. "They followed because Isaac deserved help. And because you've earned respect," Knox added quietly. "Even from people who used to stand on the other side of the line." Falcon took a slow breath. "I'm not looking for recognition." Knox smirked softly. "Good. That makes it mean more." Across the room, Schiff Delgado and Eli Spanner Cruz were recounting the chase to a group of iron stallions who listened with quiet admiration. Tank stood at a small table, showing a silver saint how he'd backed up the helmet cam footage in 3 different secure locations, described not as technical steps, but simply as keeping the truth safe in more than one place. Derek Lawson arrived moments later with his wife and Isaac. When they walked through the doorway, the room softened. Not loudly, there were no cheers, no applause, but the kind of warm, quiet acknowledgement that comes from people who've been holding hope in their hands. Isaac clung to his father's side at first, but when he saw Falcon, his eyes brightened. Falcon knelt slightly to meet Isaac's gaze without towering over him. "You doing a little better today?" he asked gently. Isaac nodded and took a small step forward. "I slept," he whispered. Falcon smiled. "Good, that's the most important thing." Derek looked around the room, exhaling shakily. "I didn't expect all of this." Grizzly clapped him on the back with a gentleness uncommon for someone his size. "None of us did, but it felt right." Knox raised his glass slightly, drawing the room's attention, not demanding it, but guiding it. "We're not here for speeches," he said. "We're not here for promises or for history, or for anything that belongs to the past." He gestured subtly toward Isaac. "We're here because of what's ahead, because after what we all did together, it'd be a real shame to go back to old lines and old fences." Falcon watched as heads nodded around the room. There were no chants, no bravado, no clinking of bottles. Just a simple, collective breath shared among people who had set aside everything that once divided them. He stepped forward then, not because he wanted to speak, but because the moment felt like it needed something from him. Something quiet, steady, and sincere. "No matter what patch we wear," Falcon said, his voice even and soft, "there's something bigger than any of our clubs. Doing the right thing. Protecting people who can't protect themselves. And making sure kids like Isaac never have to wonder if the world is listening." He hesitated, searching for the right way to finish, a way that didn't sound rehearsed or forced. What we started on that bridge felt like something worth carrying forward. Silence settled, deep and warm. Then Knox lifted his glass again. "To carrying it forward." Glasses lifted, not clattered, raised gently, like a promise made in the quiet instead of shouted through noise. Derek squeezed his son's shoulder. Isaac looked up at the gathered riders and managed a tiny smile. A brave one, the kind that stretches across fear and reaches toward hope. Falcon looked around the room and felt something in his chest loosen further. This wasn't a celebration. It wasn't even closure. It was something more subtle. A beginning. A new code not spoken aloud, but understood in the way people stood beside one another. The kind of code that said, "We ride for more than ourselves now." Outside, dusk deepened into night, and the porch lights of the clubhouse glowed like small, quiet stars, guiding lights for anyone who needed to find their way home. The night had settled fully by the time Falcon stepped outside the clubhouse, though the warm glow pouring through the open barn doors softened the darkness around him. It was the kind of night that didn't feel threatening. Instead, it wrapped itself around the quiet like a gentle shawl. Crickets hummed in a slow rhythm from the edges of the property. The breeze rustled through the tall grass beyond the gravel lot, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once before the stillness reclaimed the moment. He paused at the threshold, listening to the soft blend of voices drifting from inside. The riders were still talking, not loudly, but with the easy cadence of people who had found a shared purpose without needing to name it. Here and there, a laugh rose, brief, warm, never sharp enough to disturb the peaceful air. Falcon took one last look over his shoulder at the scene within the clubhouse. Isaac leaning comfortably against Derek's side, Elena sipping tea while speaking with one of the night howlers, Grizzly passing around plates piled with food, Shift telling a story with his hands moving animatedly, and Knox Rivera leaning on a workbench with an expression that suggested something like hope, though he would never say the word out loud. Falcon smiled quietly. For all the darkness that had unfolded in the last few days, this gathering felt like light, soft, steady, and real. He walked down the steps and into the gravel lot, boots crunching softly beneath him. His motorcycle waited in the glow of the porch lights, its chrome catching reflections of the warm bulbs above. The bike looked almost tranquil in the quiet, as though it, too, had earned a moment of rest after carrying so much weight. He ran his fingers along the handlebars, feeling the familiar comfort of leather grips worn smooth over years of riding. This machine had taken him through storms and through silence, through nights of uncertainty and mornings where roads stretched forever without a single interruption. But tonight, the road ahead felt different, not because of where it led, but because of how he would ride it now. As he stood there, Falcon found his mind drifting back to the beginning, to the moment Mila Lawson burst through the carnival crowd with fear trembling in her voice. That single moment had torn open a path none of them expected to walk again. The Iron Riders had tried so hard to build a peaceful life, to leave behind the chapters written in harder ink. But sometimes the world changed its demands, and people had to choose between the comfort of silence and the responsibility of stepping forward. Falcon knew he would make the same choice again. He heard footsteps on the gravel behind him. When he turned, Isaac stood there, half hidden behind the half-open door. The boy's hair was mussed from play and rest, and he held the small stuffed bear in one hand. His voice was soft, nearly swallowed by the quiet. "Mr. Falcon?" he called gently. Falcon knelt slightly to make the world level between them. "Hey, Isaac," he said. "You doing all right?" Isaac nodded, scuffing one shoe against the gravel. "I just wanted to say thank you. Dad said you saved me, and he said you didn't even have to." Falcon felt the words move through him like a warm current. He rested a hand lightly on Isaac's shoulder. "You don't ever need to thank me," he murmured. "If someone needs help, especially a kid, you show up. That's just what a decent person does." Isaac looked down for a moment, then back up at Falcon with a seriousness that felt older than his years. "When I grow up," he whispered, "I want to ride a motorcycle too, like you. Dad said if I do, I have to follow your rules." Falcon raised an eyebrow with a quiet smile. "Oh? And what rules are those?" Isaac shifted the stuffed bear from one hand to the other. "He said real riders protect people who can't protect themselves, and that you follow that rule all the time." Falcon nodded slowly. "Your dad's a smart man." He brushed a bit of dust from Isaac's shoulder. "And he's right. If you ever decide to ride one day, do it with a good heart. That's what matters." For a moment, they stayed there in stillness, the quiet kind where something passes between two people without needing to be spoken. Falcon saw a piece of himself in the boy's eyes, the part that believed in doing the right thing even when the world made it difficult. Elena appeared at the doorway, calling gently, "Isaac, come on, sweetie. It's time to head home." Isaac gave Falcon a small wave. "Thank you," he said again, not as an obligation, but as something true. Falcon watched the family walk toward their car, Isaac tucked safely between his parents. The car pulled away slowly, its headlights sweeping briefly across the clubhouse before disappearing down the road. When the taillights faded completely into the night, Falcon exhaled softly and turned back toward the building. Knox Rivera stepped out then, leaning on the doorframe with an amused expression. "You done making all of us look like lesser men, Reaves?" Falcon chuckled. "Just talking to a kid." Knox shook his head. "Kids remember things adults forget." His tone softened. "What you did on that bridge, and everything after, don't pretend it wasn't something." Falcon didn't answer. He didn't need to. Knox clapped him once on the shoulder before heading back inside, leaving Falcon alone under the cool glow of the porch lights. Falcon looked up at the stars beginning to pierce through the dark sky. They shimmered faintly, scattered across the heavens like small promises. The night was quiet, but not empty. There was meaning in the stillness, a tenderness that often settled after storms passed. He closed his eyes and breathed it in, the clean scent of cool night air, the distant hum of quiet roads, the soft pulse of a world that had, for once, tilted toward something good. The voice of the narrator, soft, warm, steady, would say it this way: "Some stories don't end with applause. Some end quietly, with a child sleeping safely again, with a father standing tall after fear tried to break him, with a mother holding her family close after the world threatened to pull it apart. And somewhere amid the quiet roads and the fading echoes of engines, 52 riders remember why they showed up in the first place. Not for glory, not for vengeance, but because courage often begins in small moments, moments when someone chooses to care instead of turning away. Falcon placed his helmet over his head, the visor catching the warm reflection of clubhouse lights one last time. The engine beneath him rumbled softly, a familiar pulse that steadied the air. He eased onto the road, letting the night stretch open around him like a peaceful path waiting to be explored. As he rode away, the quiet followed him, not as emptiness, but as a companion, steady, comforting, and kind. Some heroes ride loudly, some heroes ride with thunder behind them. But the ones we remember the longest are often the ones who ride quietly, choosing light, choosing compassion, choosing the road that leads someone home.